Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 609 for the 14th of June 2020. Richard Saunders here with you from a rainy, soggy Sydney, Australia. In fact, I can hear the rain falling down on the Skeptic Zone studios at the moment. Coming up on this week's show, I interview Associate Professor Paul Willis, who is a paleontologist. He likes pails, he likes dinosaurs, he likes ancient things. Paul and I have known each other for many years, and it was a delight to hook up with Paul, who's in Adelaide, South Australia, for this interview. And in fact, at Paul's suggestion, we videoed the interview, and that's up on the Skeptic Zone YouTube channel. Lots of people use that to look through the Skeptic Zone episodes, and it's on the Skeptic Zone Facebook page. So if you want to hear the interview with Paul and I coming up, great, go ahead. If you want to hear and see it, a sneak peek behind the scenes, then head to the Skeptic Zone Facebook or YouTube. Anyway, Paul and I discuss dinosaur news and his new series about dinosaur news. Associate Professor Paul Willis from Paleo Pictures. Following that, it's Michele with Logical Fallacies. This week, Michele looks at moving the goalposts. Not much moving of any goalposts lately, or I do notice, though, here in Australia, at least football and various codes like that are starting to be played again. I wonder if they'll be moving the goalposts. Then we have the bizarre situation, well, there's lots of bizarre situations in these days of the COVID, of a leaflet going around, doing the rounds, proclaiming that diseases are basically a myth. That includes COVID. How crazy can you get? Find out as I read out this crazy COVID letter later in the show. Then to round off the show, it's the return of the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. And Tim's going to be reading from the current issue of the Skeptic magazine, part 1 of A History of Chiropractic by Dr. Stephen Basser. Next week, part 2. Now, before we get into the first interview on today's show, just a quick look at the fact that in the last week, the strange outfit known as Homeopathy Plus, Magical Sugar and Water, are posting yet again the wonders of homeopathy as used in India to fight coronavirus or to protect from coronavirus. And at the same time, I've noticed news reports from India about how dire the situation is there. So something's not working, is it, Homeopathy Plus? And my friend Andres Pinta from the ESP, the European Skeptics podcast, has been in touch with me lately, and he's helping to organize yet more subtitles for the Vaccination Chronicles. And if you go to skepticzone.tv, scroll right to the bottom of the page, you will see the Vaccination Chronicles, a documentary I did about 4 or 5 years ago. And he's helping to organize, let's see, what have we done so far? We've added Polish captions and Slovenian captions with more to come. Thank you, Andres. It's a wonderful thing to do to help that project, and especially at this time where vaccination is on everybody's mind. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and get a nice hot cup of coffee while I dream about, I don't know, a warm bath and a big white fluffy dressing gown. That would be very good. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Of his mind with Professor Paul Willis. Well, folks, I'm delighted to welcome to the Skeptic Zone a man I've known for many years, almost 2 decades, I think. We've had some fun adventures together with dinosaurs and skepticism and all sorts of things. It's Associate Professor Paul Willis. Hello, Paul.
G'day, Richard. How you doing, mate?
You know what? During this crazy time of the lockdown and the shut up and the get lost, I'm not doing too bad. I can't remember the last time I had a sniffle or a cold or a cough or anything like that.
Yeah, and might I say, it looks like the pair of us are growing old disgracefully. It's wonderful to see.
Speak for yourself.
I can hear an edit.
Well, maybe. In the past, folks, we've had some funny times, Paul and I, because occasionally, Paul, when you lived in Sydney, we would be confused for each other. I think when we both had darker hair. Yeah.
When we were younger people, I'm not sure who was whose doppelganger, but we were mistaken on several occasions.
Well, the strangest one to me was the phone rang here one day, and I picked it up and I said hello, and the voice on the other end said, "Is that you, Paul Willis?" that was the strangest one. Paul, also known as Paleo Paul, let's talk about your latest series of videos and your outlets for what you love to do, which is, of course, hunting for dinosaurs. Paleo Pictures. You've got a new weekly series with dinosaur news.
It's more a regular series, or should I say irregular series.
Right.
As I get enough material together to put out an episode, then I'll put out an episode. The idea is look, coronavirus and the whole lockdown really messed about with the whole business model for Paleo Pictures.
Yeah.
We couldn't go out and get sponsors. We couldn't go out and do filming. We couldn't do anything. So we more or less put Paleo Pictures into hibernation. But then it dawned on me that even in hibernation, there's still something we can do to build brand identity.
Right.
I'm still building the presence of Paleo Pictures on the social media sites, and we're getting a lot of traction, particularly on Instagram. And, the contributions to social media actually consist of posting up stories from paleontology as they come to my attention. And I thought, well, it's not going to be that much effort to be able to string a group of those together and put out a bulletin of paleo news so that people can, in one short little vodcast, are able to catch up on the latest and greatest in paleontology and dinosaurs and fossils and stories from the past presented to you in the present.
It sounds pretty good. I've been enjoying the episodes you've put up so far. Now let's talk about a few of the news items which really caught my attention. A 100 million year old.
I was going to say I wouldn't bother with a 100-year-old.
A 100 million.
Carbon dated. It's too young.
It is. Well, this one is bizarre, like a lot of ancient creatures are to us. I guess a spider scorpion.
Yeah, wow. Really weird creature. This one came from amber in Burma, and this deposit or Myanmar. This amber deposit has just been producing stunning fossils, including hatchling dinosaur birds and all sorts of weird things.
Wow.
Complete geckos and what have you. And one of the creatures that came out, and this amber's about 100 million years old, as you said.
Yeah.
And they've got multiple specimens of it, is what looks like a cross between a spider and a scorpion. They are both in the same group, and one evolved from the other. And so you've got what looks like a sort of elongate spider with a long, thin, whip-like tail. And these spider scorpions are thought to date back a couple of 100 million years prior to this find.
Wow.
So, that group probably goes back to about 300 million years ago. But if you're an arachnophobe, don't watch that episode, because it is truly terrifying to look in the glorious detail of this particular creature.
And to think this group of creatures or what have you were on the planet for such a huge length of time before being extinct or dying out or evolving or whatever. But for countless eons, there were spider scorpions and creatures like that.
Well, exactly. I mean, in a sense, you're talking about a missing link. You're talking about a representative of a group that's not a fully fledged spider. It's not a fully fledged scorpion. It is a representative of the transition between those two groups.
There's got to be a movie now. Someone's going to listen to this and say, the next movie is going to be the Spider Scorpion movie.
Yeah. Oh, no, even better, because it's preserved in amber. Some clueless person will want to reconstruct it from the DNA and probably confuse the DNA with, I don't know, elephant DNA or something. So we end up with giant spider scorpions.
Well, I think Jurassic Park lost a lot of opportunity. They could have had creatures from all sorts of epochs and eras. And what about a giant wombat, Jurassic Park? Let's have the giant wombat back again. Now, speaking
we're more likely to do that because we can actually get DNA, theoretically, we could get DNA either for the larger species of the wombats that lived in the couple of tens of thousands of years ago,
right?
Or the group called the diprotodontids, which are often described as massive wombats, the largest marsupials that have ever lived.
Yeah, I've seen
the chances of getting DNA out of amber, 100 million years old, is zero.
Well, I mean, it makes for fun movies anyway. One of our reporters on the Skeptic Zone, Trish Hahn, one of her favorite movies is the original Jurassic Park, and I saw it at her place about a year or two back, and wow, it was a fabulous nostalgia trip. It really is.
And some of the wonderful mistakes in it. I mean, they misspelt Stegosaurus at one stage. They had a vial when Nedry goes in to steal the specimens of embryos. One of the species of dinosaur is the thing, I think it's Acrocanthosaurus. And at the time, it was only known from a couple of lumbar vertebrae of an adult.
Right.
So the only way you could identify the embryos of Acrocanthosaurus would be to grow one to adulthood, kill it, strip it down, and identify that the lumbar vertebrae were the same thing. And then you could say, yes, that was Acrocanthosaurus.
Oh, Paul, you're spoiling the movie magic.
Oh, look, technically speaking, I'm not a pedant.
No. I know, I understand completely. No, I love all those movies. I put my brain on hold. It's having a lot of fun. But we're talking about ancient Australian animals here. Let's go even further back. Another news item that you covered in the series was a discovery of a new dinosaur in Victoria, which is particularly interesting when it links up to other dinosaur species in the southern hemisphere. And amazingly enough, this thing could have lived in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah, this is one of the the meat-eating dinosaurs. You know, when you say the theropods or the meat-eating dinosaurs, everyone thinks of Tyrannosaurus or Allosaurus, you know, the big meat eaters. But the theropods are a really diverse group. There's a lot of weird and strange lineages. And one of those strange lineages has just been identified from a neck bone found in Victoria. Again, it's about 100 million years old. And the only thing like it is from similar age deposits in Madagascar. Now, at the time, Australia was so far south that animal would have been living within the Antarctic Circle. So you immediately we're learning a heck of a lot just simply by the finding and identification of that one single neck bone, that this strange group of theropods were present across Gondwana, the giant southern continent, but also that they were living in environments that we don't expect many animals to be living in today.
Yeah.
Although it would have probably been warmer below the Antarctic Circle
Right.
100 million years ago, it wouldn't have been that much warmer. It would still be pretty harsh conditions to make a living in. So it really opens out our whole understanding of the abilities of these creatures to live in a number of harsh environments.
Now, of course, you know what you're talking about, especially in this situation, because you've been down to the Antarctic quite a few times.
Yeah, I've been down, I think it's 11 times now. I was a expert tour guide with Aurora Expeditions. Specifically, my job was to introduce the tourists to the fossil deposits on the Antarctic Peninsula. And there are spectacular fossil deposits there because they haven't been picked over by people.
Yeah.
Anywhere else in the world, if you've got, well, there's a couple of factors that are in your favor in Antarctica. Everywhere else in the world where there have been spectacular fossil deposits, because they're easier to get to and there's people around, many of them have been picked clean. But also in Antarctica, there's no soil, there's no vegetation. So you can see the bedrock in most places that you go to. If there's no snow or ice, and surprisingly large areas of the Antarctic Peninsula, particularly on the eastern side where the fossils are completely bare of snow and ice, you see the bedrock, you see the fossils.
Wow.
And it's and the icing on the cake is one set of deposits that produce fossils in Antarctica span the period of time dinosaurs disappeared. A sequence of beds that date from about 70 million years down to about 55 million years ago.
That covers it.
And the extinction is almost slap bang in the middle of that period.
We're talking about 65 to 66 million years ago?
65.5, depends on the day of the week.
Yeah.
And there are places in Antarctica where on Seymour Island, where you can literally walk across an ancient seabed, crammed full of fossils, and then there's a line in the dirt, and the fossils disappear.
Wow!
And that line in the dirt is the KT extinction.
I keep threatening to come with you on your next expedition. I'm sure we can share a cabin, Paul. I'm sure that wouldn't be any problem at all.
Yeah. I'm not sure how that whole venture is going to go post-COVID, but it would be nice to get back down there.
Finally, some news about T-Rex and the fact that the animal itself seemed to change quite a bit during its own lifespan.
Yeah, look, we've known for some time that T-Rex was quite different as a juvenile in form as to what it was like when it was an adult. And this had been quantified into a growth curve a couple of times in the past. But what happened, and this was only last week that this was published, is some researchers went back and looked at all 44 specimens that are known for Tyrannosaurus rex. They measured something like 1,875 features of those specimens, and then they plugged that in to produce a growth curve. So we know pretty accurately how long they lived, when their growth spurts were, the periods of growth. So you've got a juvenile, you've got a sub-adult, you've got an adult. There's actually 5 periods of growth that they've identified. And so we can actually track how these things changed as they grew. And as a young creature, they would have the most obvious differences were they would tend to have a narrow and relatively shallow skull. And as they got older, the skull got deeper and broader, and they lost teeth.
Well, that makes sense.
The number of teeth decreased as they grew older. There are many other differences, but the fact that we've now got this really detailed report as to how Tyrannosaurus changed throughout its life, really an insight into their biology.
It's fascinating. Do we have a decent understanding of what a life expectancy for a T-Rex would be?
About 28 years. About 28 years. And most of the growth is concentrated into a period from about, I think it's about 7 years old to about 15. It's not a constant flatline growth. It's almost exponential, and then it tapers off. And that the main growth period is right in the middle there.
Wow, so much to find out. And folks, the only reason I knew about these items we've been discussing today is I took the time and I watched the first 3 episodes of Paleo Pictures, the dinosaur, the news updates, the Dino updates, the Paleo updates, Paleo Pictures News it's called. Where can people see that for themselves, Paul?
We've got a YouTube channel. Just look up Paleo News or Paleo Pictures. And also we are putting them out as a Instagram TV series, which you can view through Paleo Pictures on Instagram. And if I can just give a shout out, because Paleo Pictures as a business, pretty unusual beast, because not only are we a documentary production company, but we also are a research company.
Right.
And we aim to fund the research that we make the documentaries about. It's a bit of an unusual beast. And if it wasn't for a number of people in the skeptic community in Australia who came on board as shareholders really early on, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I'm not going to embarrass anyone by naming names, but a big shout out to all of those guys who got behind us. And if anybody else is interested in supporting our activities, we have got a Patreon account.
Right.
And if you want to support the future of paleontology and telling the world the wonders of the mysteries from the past, then hop onto our Patreon account and look at becoming a patron for Paleo Pictures.
Folks, you can support the future of the past. How about that?
That's the message.
You like it? You can have it. Paul Willis, Associate Professor Paul Willis, always a pleasure to have you on the Skeptic Zone. You've been my guest on the show quite a few times. You even have your own theme music, which is quite an honor. We look forward, and I look forward especially myself, to watching each new episode of Paleo Pictures News as it comes online. But for now, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Richard. You take care.
Dr. Harriet Hall, MD, known to thousands as the Skepdoc, a retired family physician and former Air Force flight surgeon. She writes about medicine, so-called complementary and alternative medicine, science, quackery, and critical thinking. Harriet now has a free course, a series of 10 video lectures on science-based medicine and alternative medicine. The videos and an accompanying course guide can be found by following the link at skepdoc.info or by visiting web.randy.org/educational-modules.html. Topics covered in the series are science-based medicine versus evidence-based medicine, what is CAM, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy and herbal medicine, energy medicine, miscellaneous alternatives, pitfalls in research, and science-based medicine in the media and politics. Harriet covers each topic in a matter-of-fact, no-nonsense way that's sure to educate and entertain. Skepdoc.info.
Logical fallacies. What are logical fallacies, and why is it important that critical thinkers should know about them? A logical fallacy is an error we can make in reasoning, but it usually crops up when we are discussing or arguing our point of view. Some people might even knowingly use them to try and score cheap points in an argument due to intellectual laziness. They are traps we can fall into, but if we know what to look out for, we can spot them when they occur and stop ourselves from using them. This time we'll look at moving the goalposts.
Also known as raising the bar and the shifting sands, this is when your opponent does not accept a successful answer to their challenge and insists on you answering more and more questions.
Sometimes people simply cannot accept the fact that their challenge has been answered, thus showing that their own point of view is wrong. Instead of acknowledging this, and that can be awkward for any of us, they'll add to their challenge with new conditions that makes it harder and harder to show them wrong.
A creationist challenged a paleontologist to show at least one example of a transitional fossil that links dinosaurs to birds. When the paleontologist did just that, the creationist complained that all this new fossil did was to create two new gaps on either side of the fossil record and wanted yet more examples to fill in those gaps.
Since the creationists' worldview and religion are to them beyond question, it would be very hard, bordering on impossible for them to accept evidence that contradicts this view. They often resort to moving the goalposts to preserve their belief system. In fact, science has discovered thousands of examples of transitions in the fossil record, showing clear evolutionary steps within a species and from one species to another.
I think the moon landings were faked in a movie studio. There was no way the USA had the technology to reach the moon in 1969. I mean, look at all the hundreds of inconsistencies and impossible things we are supposed to believe.
As each claim made by those espousing a moon landing conspiracy is met and debunked, for example, the multiple light sources on the moon or the lack of stars in photos of the lunar sky, they either reject the evidence outright or may well accept the evidence, but then move on to yet another claim and another and another. There appears to be no degree of evidence that will finally convince them that the landings were real and humans have been to the moon.
A breatharian, someone who claims they can live on little more than fresh air, was challenged to prove her amazing claim. She agreed to be watched day and night in a city hotel room, but after only 48 hours she displayed symptoms of acute dehydration, stress, and high blood pressure. She claimed it was due to polluted air and was moved to another hotel in the countryside, but didn't improve.
This really happened. In the year 2000, the 60 Minutes TV show in Australia arranged for breatharian Jas Maheen, or Ellen Grieve, to be tested as per her claim. She was happy with the test conditions, but when it became apparent she was deteriorating from lack of food, she changed the conditions of the test, in effect, moving the goalposts. Even though 60 Minutes agreed, her health continued to decline and the test was cancelled. Protecting our worldview or belief system is a very human thing to do, and we all do it to one degree or another. It can at times protect us from simply believing in whatever someone tells us, and we should not be afraid to ask for more information and evidence. You might call it healthy skepticism. But there comes a point when moving the goalposts is about rejecting evidence that conflicts with what we want or need to be true. Knowing a logical fallacy when you hear one, and even knowing its name, is important when arguing your point of view. However, you may come across as arrogant and not get very far if you call it out by name to your opponent when you hear it being used. If your opponent calls you out for using one, it's time to stop and think about how you are making your case. Use your knowledge of logical fallacies wisely, and remember that even if your point of view is right and you know all the pitfalls in arguing your case, it doesn't always mean you'll win on the day. And as skeptics, we must also remember that we too can be wrong at times. I'm Michele Bickers from the Vic Skeptics. Thanks for listening.
To the organiser, spooky encounters, Black Stump, far outback, Australia. I am writing to you to complain about the lack of ghosts of late in your so-called most haunted house in the world tour. Imagine my displeasure when, upon arriving at the location, the haunted house in question turned out to be an outhouse. Even worse, there was a lengthy queue of people waiting to use it. When at last it was my turn to enter the house, the only disturbing aspect I encountered was the smell. Please be so kind as to refund my $23.74. Yours, disappointedly, etc., etc. P.S. I also think your gift shop can do better than to sell haunted toilet paper. Now, we've been talking about over the last couple of months, hardly a surprise, all the conspiracies and scams and cons and wacky theories, etc., to do with coronavirus. And our reporter Heidi Robertson, the Raw Skeptic, has brought this to the attention of the other Skeptic Zone reporters. This is a leaflet or a flyer, just something printed out on a sheet of paper that's been appearing in letterboxes in Australia. And it reads as follows. The coronavirus is a scam. Dear citizen, you have been deceived by the media, government, pharmaceutical companies, and doctors. It has been known for at least 150 years that germs do not cause disease. This was proven by a biologist by the name of Antoine Béchamp. He was a contemporary of Louis Pasteur. It was proven that germs are the result of a disease and are not the cause of it. Recent technology and understanding of vitamins has further confirmed this information. Disease is unnatural and doesn't occur by itself in nature. Humans have strayed from nature by growing cereal crops to store for the winter period when foods are scarce. Unfortunately, there is a hidden cost in eating grain food. When plants make a seed, they add toxic chemicals and sharp edges to discourage foraging animals from eating grass seeds and some tree seeds. When animals eat grain seeds, the toxic chemicals and sharp edges irritate the gut, causing inflammation, of the gut lining, leaky gut syndrome. This causes gaps in the gut lining to expand, which allows gut bacteria and food material to enter the bloodstream. And also, grain is deficient in vitamins, which humans need. Grain is a high-octane fuel designed for birds. When humans eat grain, it causes an acceleration of their metabolic rate and a small increase in body temperature. A doctor would call this a fever, but this fever is not caused by germs, but by fast digesting sugars from grain, milk, and sugar sources. This is the true cause of 99% of all human disease. Note, junk food causes disease, not germs. That's why coronavirus mostly occurs on cruise ships, nursing homes, theme parks, and fast food outlets. Now, the next couple of sentences are in big, bold print. There is only one human disease, which is called vitamin deficiency disease. There are not thousands of different diseases. There is no such thing as viruses. I know because I have worked in an electron microscope unit where I have learnt how to use all the equipment. I also learnt about the electron microscope's limitations as well. An electron microscope wouldn't be able to find a, quote, virus, end quote, if in fact they did exist. You can't photograph what you can't find. All alleged photos of viruses are blurry images. Why? This is a deliberate deception because viruses don't exist, so they have to make the photos unclear so that nobody can see that the photos are of cell debris and are not photos of viruses. The electron microscope can see individual atoms, so there can be no excuse for not having clear and precise images of the so-called, quote, viruses, end quote. Viruses are illogical nonsense. You can't be dead 1 minute and alive the next. A virus is something that has no brain, legs, nervous system, sight, ears, and wouldn't be able to survive in a real world. Don't be fooled by medical and government officials who hope to gain profit, power, money, and population control from this huge global scam. Now, the next part is interesting, and I'll get to that in a minute. So it's in bold print. Help to stop this medical system dictatorship. Sign petitions against forced vaccinations. Refer to Informed Medical Options Party for petitions against forced medications. Now, I put out a call out on the Skeptic Zone Twitter page, or Twitter feed, for anybody who might know anything about this flyer and the information. And I had a tip-off, which led me to debate.org, and one of the people who take part in debates on that website, who goes under the moniker of Akhenaten, there's an Egyptian themed icon, and they have started a debate as recording 6 days ago. The coronavirus is a fraud, and if we go down and read their opening arguments, it's word for word what I just read to you. You have been deceived by the media, government, pharmaceutical companies and doctors. It has been known for at least 150 years, etc., etc., etc. Right at the end, though, it says, don't be fooled by the medical and government officials who help to gain profit, power, money, and population control from this huge global scam. Help to stop this medical system dictatorship. And then it says, sign petitions against forced vaccinations and medications. So it doesn't talk about going to IMOP. IMOP. What is IMOP? Well, the website is imopparty.com, and it says here, the Informed Medical Options Party, IMOP, formerly known as the Involuntary Medication Objectors, vaccination fluoride party. So that gives you an inkling, I think, of what they're all about. And it says they want to stand candidates for elections. IMOP believes that the medical freedoms of Australians are at risk like never before in history. So a little bit of scaremongering there. IMOP's principal platforms are as follows: no forced medication, no compulsory or coerced vaccination, no fluoride in our water. And one of the prominent people featured in the videos on this website is none other than Judy Wileman, who we've mentioned before, past recipient of the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award for her anti-vaccination rhetoric and downplaying the emergency that was and still is the coronavirus situation. And there are all sorts of PhDs and people associated with that movement, that particular party, but we are reminded of that old adage that no matter how crazy the idea is, you'll always find a percentage of doctors or PhDs or people like that who support it. Now, I really don't know if this ridiculous flyer with its conspiracy theories and nonsense is truly linked to the IMOP party. IMOP. There's got to be a joke in there somewhere. Maybe the party itself. I doubt it. I think somebody has just found that online somewhere, probably on that debate.org or who knows where, copied it and just tacked on the IMOP information because they did a Google and saw that here in Australia there is such a party who are running petitions against basically vaccination when you boil down to it. But that flyer I think I will now upload to coronaconspiracy.cloud. Now, we've mentioned this before, and I recommend you go and have a look at that website, coronaconspiracy.cloud. It's a site where people have been posting up no end of conspiracies and quackery and bad advice to do with coronavirus. And it's beautifully laid out. There's lots of thumbnails here. You can scroll down, which I'm doing now. And for example, what's the first one here? COVID-19 is a false flag operation to usher in the New World Order. Well, there you go. And also appearing on this site amongst all the quackery and nonsense are posts from Homeopathy Plus, especially in regards to how wonderfully well homeopathy is working in India. Not. Well, somebody once said, and I'll say it again, we live in interesting times.
Allora ciao, io mi chiamo Professore Dave, io ti voglio insegnare tutte le cose sulla scienza. Parliamo di fisica, di chimica, biologia, astronomia, matematica e tante altre cose. Guardami su YouTube, arrivederci. Hey everyone, this is Professor Dave. I want to teach you about all kinds of things regarding science. I want to tell you about physics. I want to tell you about chemistry, biology, astronomy, math, and many, many more things. Come check me out on YouTube. The channel is called Professor Dave Explains. Take it easy.
He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave Explains.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, my name's Tim Mendham. I'm the Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics and also editor of our magazine, The Skeptic. And this time I'll be reading an article called Back to the Past, which actually comes out of our June 2020 issue of the magazine. So it's pretty up to date. Then again, at the same time, it is a reprint of a classic Catch article from 1995. And the thing is, it's about chiropractic. And between 1995 and 2020, not much has changed. So it's still very relevant. This was written by Dr. Stephen Basser, a retired GP and former Vice President of the Victorian Skeptics. He gave this article as a presentation at our 1995 convention. In the article, Stephen says he wants to review the history of chiropractic and examine its scientific status. At the time, this was very timely, as it was the 100th anniversary of the founding of chiropractic, and now, this year, it's the 125th. He adds that to avoid any potential confusion and misunderstanding, I thought it would be helpful to start with some conclusions. What I am saying here is that many of the claims of chiropractic are, at present, unscientific or, more accurately, scientifically unproven. What he is not saying is that all of orthodox medicine is scientifically proven. Those who wish to read that message into this paper are advised to stop reading now to save disappointment and to preserve their prejudice. The early history. Chiropractic was founded by Daniel David Palmer in September 1895 in Davenport, Iowa, in the US. Palmer was born in Ontario, Canada in 1845, and at the age of 20 travelled with his brother to the USA. In 1887 he moved to Iowa and opened a magnetic healing practice. Practitioners of magnetic healing believed they belonged to a select group of persons whose personal magnetism was so great it gave them the power to cure disease. According to the official history, Palmer performed the first chiropractic adjustment in September 1895 on Harvey Lillard, a janitor working in the building where Palmer practiced. Lillard had been deaf for 17 years, claiming he became so suddenly when something gave way in his back while stooped in a cramped position. Palmer examined Lillard and found an out-of-place vertebra in his spine. After applying pressure that moved the vertebra back into place, Lillard's hearing returned. Palmer believed he had succeeded in one of his life's quests to find the secret of disease, why one person falls ill while his or her neighbour does not. He confided his discovery to a friend, Reverend Samuel Weed, who suggested the name chiropractic from the Greek for done by hand. Palmer had no medical training and was unaware that the nerves of hearing are entirely within the skull. He believed he had restored the man's hearing by relieving pressure on a spinal nerve affecting hearing. Palmer proposed the principle of the spinal subluxation and established chiropractic based upon it. He believed that the body requires an unobstructed flow through the nervous system of an ethereal substance called innate intelligence. Vertebral subluxations, minor dislocations of the spinal column, were believed to interfere with the flow of innate and caused an alteration in nervous tone. By depriving areas of the body of innate, subluxations produced disease, and Palmer claimed that 95% of all diseases were caused by subluxated vertebrae. Treatment involved identifying these subluxations and manually restoring the vertebrae to their normal alignment, thus releasing the innate intelligence, allowing the body's natural healing powers to cure the patient. From its inception, chiropractic was defended as a science. For chiropractors, though, scientific knowledge was not acquired by experimental control of variables in a carefully designed study. Instead, they examined and treated patients and argued, as many still do today, that the results of their clinical treatments constituted scientific proof. Palmer's son Bartlett Joshua, or BJ as he is known, had bought out his father's burgeoning chiropractic business after a bitter falling out and assumed control of the financial and educational affairs, proclaiming, "Our school is on a business, not a professional basis. We manufacture chiropractors." BJ was not an advocate of systematic science. Ian Coulter in 1990 said that there has been a long history within chiropractic of anti-intellectualism, and again this was heavily influenced by B.J. Palmer. "We can't give you brains, but we can give you a diploma." Throughout the 19th century, supporters of natural theology held to the view that science ennobled man because it demonstrated the magnificence of God. Chiropractors envisioned man as a microcosm of the universe, with the innate intelligence a manifestation of a larger universal intelligence, controlling everything. Chiropractic as a new scientific law enabling healing of the sick was an important contribution to revealing the goodness of God. By comparison, the emerging scientific medicine was regarded as atheistic materialism. Chiropractic was described by its supporters as, quote, the only truly scientific method of healing, because it balanced the spiritual and the material. Chiropractors believed their science was superior to medicine clinically and morally, and attempted to appeal to those who were concerned about the growth of science and the perceived decline in spiritual values. During the early years of the 20th century, in many states of the USA, legislation was introduced mandating basic scientific training. In response, chiropractic colleges taught sufficient science to pass the basic tests, while continuing to stress the importance of the earlier teachings. A good example of this is the response to the germ theory of disease. Chiropractic initially taught that bacteria were unrelated to disease. In response to the science legislation, some bacteriology was introduced into chiropractic education, but chiropractors were taught that bacteria were not causally related to disease. It was vertebral subluxations that caused disease by making a person susceptible to bacterial infection. This was an important period during which chiropractic tried to retain sufficient distance from scientific medicine to be seen as a distinct alternative, while absorbing enough of the teachings of science and medicine to retain credibility. Initially, these attempts were unsuccessful, and chiropractic entered a period of decline. Even as recently as the 1960s, many chiropractic schools in the USA were using textbooks that had not been updated for decades. Beginning in the 1970s, the tide began to turn. And interestingly, there was a growing skepticism about medicine and science that helped things along. Scientific medicine was accused of being reductionist and of having ignored the more human aspects of healthcare. Chiropractic joined this chorus of criticism, and an alliance was formed between chiropractic and the growing holistic health movement. In some quarters, chiropractic even dusted off its spiritual emphasis, having once again found a receptive audience. Now that's the end of part 1 of this article. Part 2, make sure you tune in next week to hear about the chiropractic wars and other exciting things and the way chiropractic has developed or not over the recent decades. That's Classic Catch Chiropractic from the June 2020 issue of The Skeptic. Now, at the time of this recording, this issue is not available for free to download, unlike almost all of the other issues of our magazine. You can see those other issues at skeptics.com.au and download everything from 1981 up till the last year. But this article does form part of a major investigative feature in the June 2020 issue of the magazine on chiropractic, in which we look at so many different aspects: shonky research, shonky philosophy, those chiropractors who belong in a shame file for promoting all sorts of shonky science and medicine, and various other aspects of the industry, including the role, or lack of it, of regulators. This is part of a major undertaking by Australian skeptics and others to look at this particular industry, which wants to be seen as scientific, but whose underpinnings are anything but. So if you want to read more about chiropractic in this issue of the magazine, you'll have to subscribe, which you can do on our website, skeptics.com.au.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to those people who continue to support the podcast at www.skepticzone.tv via Patreon or PayPal. Welcome to some new Patreons in the last week. Thank you very much. I shall write a little thank you letter to you, and to the people who have contributed more via just chipping in. Much appreciated, truly much appreciated. In fact, it's because of people like you supporting and chipping in that the show keeps going. Coming up on next week's show, another Logical Fallacy with Michele Bickers, another typewritten letter. Who writes letters on typewriters anymore? And soon there'll be another think tank session with the Skeptic Zone reporters. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. What do you want? You've had your breakfast? Yeah, I know. And before I sign off... You know I'm trying to record, don't you?
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.
Okay, we have here Riley and Holly Franklin. Do you want to say hello?
Hello. Hello.
And we have a dice out of one of Holly's board games. What game have we taken this dice out of?
Time of the Daleks.
Time of the Daleks. So, on this dice, we don't have numbers 1 to 6. We have 6 different symbols. Holly, do you want to tell us what these 6 different symbols are? All right, tell us.
Running, diplomacy, science, cunning, tactics, and strength.
Okay, so we've got 6 different symbols that represent the 6 different things that the Doctor uses to complete these challenges in the board game. Riley's going to roll the dice and Holly is going to make the predictions. So, Holly, which of the 6 things do you want to predict is going to come up the first time? So the options are running, diplomacy, science, cunning, tactics, and strength.
Tactics.
Tactics. Okay, Riley, roll the dice. What's that? Strength. Okay, Holly, make another guess.
Diplomacy.
Diplomacy. Okay, Riley, roll. What's that?
Diplomacy.
Got one. Okay, last one. Make one last guess.
Science.
Science. Whoops. On the ground. What did it land on?
It landed on science.
Really?
Science.
Did we get 2 out of 3?
We got science.
High five. And nice.
Well, this one. Think.
Okay.
Okay, you ready to do it?
Yep.
Yay.